Welcome back, everybody. I'm here today at the Simpsons house. If you're familiar with the show, it looks familiar to you. Um, just looking for something different at this point. Kind of bored. So, today, this video is going to cover a very important topic. It's something that you really can't do well in the class without understanding, and that is how to use our course outline effectively. Now, we're going to do a couple different days where this is what we talk about. But today we're going to talk about it in terms of a informative speech. We'll come back later and talk about persuasion specifically and look at Monroe's motivated sequence. So don't get those two sort of confused. But this is about informative speaking. So let's jump into it here. So this is your outline. You have, of course, a copy of this in your packet. It says what, page 23. Um, what I want to do, a couple things. One, I want to just walk you through it and introduce you to what's in it. Second, we'll talk about what each of these things is and does in a little more detail. And then last, we will make one. So here's your introduction. Notice, very importantly, that you're going to start speaking here. This name, topic, purpose, that's just for bookkeeping purposes. When you get this and you actually turn yours in, you can copy and paste this from your course pack to a new Word doc, fill it out, save it, send it in. It will expand out, so you can make it as long as you need to within reason. But start speaking here, and what you'll notice is that there's an attention getter as the very first thing that you're going to do. You're not very first going to tell us your name or your topic. You're just going to do your attention getter. Now, first, why? Why is that a good idea? Well, mainly, your attention getter is designed to hook your audience early so that you can maintain their attention later. But if you don't have it early, you can't very well keep it as the speech progresses. Not only that, but just the mention of your name or your topic could turn some people off. So, for example, if you're talking about a topic like climate change, and you've got someone who just feels like they've been, worn out with the discussions on that topic, they may shut you off just because of your speech. However, if you can provide them with a really nice and effective attention getter, that can help them hang on for the duration and really bring them on board no matter what they think about your topic. Also, seems kind of strange, but even your name can throw people off. Now, I'm sure you all have wonderful names. I'll use myself as an example here. My name's Carl, as you know. And when you think of Carl and you think of popular culture, TV, movies, that kind of thing, who comes to mind? Please let me help. So you've got Carl from The Walking Dead. You've got the llama Carl, right? Carl, that kills people. I've seen that one many times. You've got Carl from Sling Blade. You've got Carl from Caddyshack. Um, I have the name, and I can't really think of any heroes that come to mind for me, right? So, with that said, my name may just make somebody start thinking about The Walking Dead, and now they're going down some mental rabbit hole, not paying attention to me anymore. Maybe you have a different name. Let's just, John or Jane, and someone in that room has maybe had a relationship with someone by that same name. Now they're just thinking about that person. They're not paying attention to you. So, hook them early with the attention getter. We'll come back and talk about ways to do all this. Then you're going to tell us your name and your topic real easy. The statement of purpose is also simple. It's very straightforward. Wherever you see on here quotation marks, and there should be some here, for example, I want you to say these words, just verbatim. By the end of this speech, you should what? You should know more about the topic because it's informative, not think a certain way, feel a certain way, act a certain way. You should better understand. You should be more informed about, know more, that sort of stuff, right? This is going back to that being objective discussion that we talked about, or I guess that's coming up in chapter 7. Then you've got your thesis statement, or some people call it the central idea. This is no different than writing. So this isn't a thesis paragraph or a thesis Group, this is a single sentence. We'll talk about ways to come up with a really nice, tight thesis statement, but it should be that. It should be nice, concise, clear, effective. You'll include that here. Then we'll talk about relevance or your audience, why they should care. So you'll say, you should care about this topic because. And then there, you're going to give us 2 reasons. And again, you'll want to think about not why you care, not why some other group cares, but why this group, this audience, these people in the class care. And you may think to yourself, I don't know these folks. This is an online class. Well, I get that, but there are demographics that you can take away. I mean, we're all enrolled at Grand Valley. You're all in college. You can look at the idea that you're all taking a speech class. You're all humans. You're all probably from Michigan. That kind of stuff, right? So don't let don't think about it too deep in terms of having to know everyone's background on every single topic that could tie into yours, right? But give them reasons they should care. We'll talk about that again in just a few minutes. Then, the next thing you're going to do, very important, is to have a preview of main points. I want you to notice something. Here you've got a preview of points. Then in the body, you've got each of those main points. Then in the conclusion, you've got the review of main points. That seems repetitive, and it is, but that's by design. There's a saying in speech world, and that is that a good speaker will tell you what they're going to tell you, and then tell you what they told you. And that's not to, just repeat themselves over and over again. That's because one of the key differences between a paper and a presentation is that in a paper, if I forgot something, I could go back and just look, right? Flip the page and there I am. I can see it. Papers also have headings, right? If you use like an APA or MLA paper, you can have a heading that sort of summarizes, or I guess identifies rather, what you're talking about at that particular time. Speeches don't have that. So for an oral presentation, the more you are letting people know what's coming, where they are, and then where they've been, the review, your audience is able to follow along. Plus, at the beginning, when you say, this is what I'm going to do, and then at the end, they see that you did that, they trust you more. I mean, it's almost subconscious, but it's there. You've kept a promise to them. So we like to do the preview, the body, and then the review at the end. Next, transition. You can say things like to begin. I don't have a quotation mark here because you could say for starters. You can get really creative with it. Somebody did a talk once on vacations, like what's the current situation with vacations, and then the second speech or persuasive speeches were why you should take vacations. So they would say things like, all right, so let's start out by packing our bags and heading out the front door. And we're going to go to, and then whatever they talked about, right? So you can get creative with it, but you could just be as plain and clear as saying, to begin, let's talk about whatever your first main point is. Now, you'll give your main points titles, basically, names. They're not going to be long. They should be, 5 words max, but ideally 1 to 3. And so you'll have those 1 to 3 words each. And then you'll have those in your main points here. Then the divisions, you'll notice these are a little different for everything. That's not, just to be clear, that is not a requirement. Like this one has to have A, B with 2 divisions, and then a C. No, this is just to show you that you can do this basically whatever way works best for you and your topic. What I will tell you is that if you have an A, you have to have a B, and you do have to have an A. So at the minimum, you'll have an A and a B. But if you want to break things down further, you can get more specific. If you want to go A through Z, I don't care, as long as it fits in the time limit and it makes sense to do it that way. One of the things to keep in mind with this as well is you're wanting to divide this up logically so that it makes sense to your audience, but you're also dividing it up in a way that will allow you to deliver the speech and stay on track. So there is sort of the idea behind keeping things organized, and you'll see that for all of these. What you'll also see for all of these is this: evidence and supporting material, cite as you go. This is a place for you to enter on the outline what sources you're going to use for main point 1. you might use the same sources in all main points, but my thought is that if you enter it here, then you will be sure to notice, or at least more likely to notice, that this first citation might go with the one that you've got listed first. I'll color code mine. I'll show you that when we do the demo. I'm actually going to make a separate video for that, but that'll be very clear. So that's the same for all of these main points. Then, this is very important as well, transitions and internal reviews. Notice that here you're moving from one chunk, the intro, to the body. So you're giving that signal to begin, and then you get into it. Here, these two transitions do a little bit of a different job. They connect and move through points. So what you'll say here is, let's say that this one is, we'll just call it X, and we'll call this one Y, and we'll call this one Z, maybe. You'll say things like, now that we've discussed X, we can discuss Y. Here, it's very similar, except you'll notice this extra and. Now that we've discussed X and we've discussed Y, we can finish with Z. So this one, it's really important. It's really important for both that you don't just say, next I will, or something like that. You want to think of it as a two-way street. So this is where we've been, this is where we're going. Now that we've covered that, we can cover this. This one, go all the way back to the top. Now that we've done this and this, we can go here. As far as number of main points go, I do like 3. I want you to keep it with 3. Everybody was going to use the same outline, and the rules will be the same for everybody. And at some point, you might think to yourself, wow, this is very restricting. We have to all use the same thing, so it's going to feel kind of cookie cutter. And you're right, it will. But that's why this is, a Com 201 course. If once you get past this, you can do sort of more creative, more unique approaches when it comes to giving a speech. This is like driver's ed, if you will. This is where we really play by some strict rules, and then later you can, really feel out your preferences for things. All right, then the next big chunk here, which does not require a transition to move into it, because this is your signal that you're in the end here. After hearing this speech, or you could start with, in conclusion, now that you've heard this speech, you should. That's fine. You can give that signal that you're moving on. But this will be the statement of purpose again, just like we had up in the top. Then your thesis, just like we had in the top, except we'll add this word clearly to the beginning, and it makes a world of difference. Then review the main points, just name, and then closure. This is the last thing you'll say, and it should relate back to your attention getter. So whatever you use for that attention getter, you're going to come back and use it here. Now, that is a snapshot of the outline you're going to use, and in doing it in an informative way. Let's go down to the next page, which is sort of instructions on how to use this speech outline format. All right, going back to the top with attention getters, I said that there are some different ways that you can get people's attention. For an informative speech, I recommend that you use a statistic, a question, humor if it's appropriate. We'll talk about that in a second. Stories are always very good, but you might save that for the persuasive speech. Most stories are innately persuasive. They teach a lesson in some way. And so let's hang on to that one and focus more on just getting this concept down. So for your attention getter, you've got some options. Here are a few that I like to hear and I use. The first is a shocking statistic. So whatever your topic is, you're not going after a shock factor, and you do want to relate the topic to the audience. But think about what you could say that would cause basically dissonance. Maybe the audience thinks about your topic, but they don't think about it in the way that maybe they should. They don't see it for what it is. You can correct that for them, and that might cause them to really pause and think, wow, really? I should think about this. So, for example, in college classes, if I was talking about STD awareness, I would tell you, and this is true, that 1 in 3 of you in this room, and we were in a real room, have an STD, Whether you know it or not, you have one. And then I'd start counting people. One, two, whoops. One, two, uh oh. And that's really going to get people to pay attention. They want to know what they need to hear next. So, a shocking statistic delivered in a way that gives them time to process it, gives the audience time to process it, can be very useful. Now, the next thing you can do here is to ask a question. There are good and bad ways to do this. Um, I would not advise you to ask a question that requires or requests a real response. So you don't want them to verbally answer. I mean, think about it. If you were doing a presentation on, let's say, go back to vacations, that speech, um, and you asked the audience, who here has ever been on a vacation? And the hands go up. That's good. You can do that. But what you don't want to do is pick one of those people in the crowd and say, yeah, tell me about your experience on the last vacation you took. Why not? Well, there's a couple risks. On one hand, you could have that person just sort of clam up and say things like, well, what do you want to know? It was all right. That's not what you really need right there. You want that flow to happen, but it could flow too much. You could get that person that starts out, with their terrible story, and it'd be like, it was in 2014, and if I'd have known it would have been the last time I saw everyone, I would have thought about it a little more. It was a hot day, right? And then they just keep going, and meanwhile, your clock is just ticking. You've got a time limit here. So, using those questions where you've got this unknown variable out there with time and story and response, you don't need that. So stay away from it. But you can do show of hands questions, like we just said. I often recommend you do at least a pair of those so they can build, right? So raise your hand if you've ever been on a vacation. Hands go up. Keep your hand up in the air if you think vacations should be mandatory once a year or whatever it is. That way, you're really getting the audience to think and interact. So they're raising their hand. Another way that you can do this is a rhetorical question. It doesn't engage the audience in the physical, but it does cause them to think, and that's a good thing to do. If you just want to ask a question like, imagine a dream vacation. Where would you go? What would you do? Who would you take with you? Those are all important things, and like that can work, but the show of hands might work better. So don't be afraid to combine these. Use both. See what happens. Key thing you'll want to do is to try out a couple different approaches. You can go to the speech lab and let them, give you some feedback. I can't decide between these two attention getters. Which one do you like best? And then you can polish that one up, right? So keep that in mind. Another way that you could maybe do this is the use of humor. Although a couple things here. Make sure that your topic is able to be laughed about easily. If you're doing a topic that's sensitive, you probably don't want to use humor. I've had a student before gave a speech on cancer, and serious true story, started the speech out with, what did one tumor say to the other tumor? And it was not taken well. And at the time, I was a guy who, my mom was in remission from throat cancer. And so, when I heard sort of a joke about cancer, I instantly felt hot, physically hot. And it fell flat. So you don't want to joke about certain topics. But if you've got something that is okay to joke about, like a vacation speech, for God's sake, go ahead, feel free, on the condition that you're funny. How do you know if you're funny? If you tell a joke and no one laughs, you're not. Or if you tell a joke and you can tell people are pity laughing, you're not. Or if you can't tell a joke, you're not. I mean, there's ways to know, right? So use your best judgment. Whatever you do, get our attention. Again, you can't keep it if you don't have it early. Next up is that self and topic introduction. So that's when you can easily just say, hi, my name is Carl, and today I want to tell you about my topic, whatever your topic is. It's very simple. Statement of purpose. Please don't overthink this. I always say that it's easier to do this with an example. So we'll come up with one in just a second, and it'll flow when we do the demo. But by the end of this speech, you should know more about vacations. You should know more about COVID-19. You should know more about whatever, and that'll change a little with the persuasive, but it's fine. It's very simple. The thesis statement. I recommend that you always do this last. It should be, as you see here, a single sentence summary of the entire presentation. What it should not do is be a list. So if your main points are X, Y, and Z, you don't want to say, you know, it's important to consider the future of our country, especially X, Y, and Z. No, you could just say it's important to consider the future of our country, and that's it. Drop it there. The relevance. Why do you care about this topic? Give us those reasons. Again, think of at least two reasons. And as I've got in the notes here, think outside the box sometimes. This might mean that, you have to get a little creative. It might be a stretch. Again, get feedback on that to see what's happening. But, a speech on vacations, why do we care about that? Well, you might care about this because you're going to, take a vacation next year. And the audience is sitting out there thinking, no, I can't take a vacation next year. I don't have money to take a vacation. Well, you've got to really think outside of the box on how you can connect that seemingly not connected topic to your audience. And I mean, you might talk about the benefits of vacations and health. You might talk about the importance of bonding time with the family or friends. There's other things that you can get to that relate back to the vacation that maybe aren't just, you should take a vacation. Here's why you should care about it, because you should. You can get around that. Again, play around with some different ideas. For the preview of main points, this is where you're going to list those 1, 2, 3, and then, of course, to begin or for starters. So here, again, as I mentioned, you need 3 main points, and we talked about the A's and the B's and the 1s and the 2s. We've talked about the supporting material. This is where that can go. We've talked about the transitions as well. Read through that on your own, but I will go on down to the conclusion here and say, look at this, copy and paste from introduction. Add the word clearly, then copy and paste from above. Relist the main points. And this is where you go back to that attention getter. There's an idea that actually is ancient Greek. It comes from a guy named Isocrates, not Socrates. But it's ring structure. And that is, if speakers finish where they begin, they've come full circle. And you've heard that expression, they came full circle. So they're back where they started after going on a sort of a journey. And an audience likes to hear ring structure in a speech, because even if they don't know what that's called or they don't readily recognize why they like what they're hearing, they'll like it because it's coming back around. It feels complete. It's finished. So if you started with that, 1 in 3 of you has an STD, go back to that statistic, but now tell us how we should feel about it, or give us some different perspective on it. So if it's informative, I might say things like, I don't want to tell them how they should feel. So I'd say, at the beginning of this presentation, I mentioned that 1 in 3 of you in this room likely have an STD. It's up to you if you want to get tested or learn more about this. However, I do think it's important that you're more informed on what the consequences and chances of STD infection are. Bam, you're finished. And you just went full circle. You came back around to where you started. Okay, that's your outline. Again, stay tuned for a demonstration video. But before we finish for today, let's look at the evaluation form. This is the form I will have in front of me while I am grading your speech. And I want to walk you through it and tell you what each item is, how the grade scale works, and how this connects directly to your outline. So let's start with why I use this. I have taught speech for a while, and some people will say speech class isn't very fair because I'm not a good speaker, but I'm a good student. It's like the paperwork part. They feel like they can do really well, but maybe not so much the speaking part. Or Other students will say, I don't feel like there should be this paperwork involved. I'm a good speaker, but I don't do well with the other stuff. So what I've done is, as close as I can, divide it 50-50. And what I mean by that is this: the four, at least 3.5 items here are going to be preparation for the most part. Then these 3.5 are going to be delivery, and question and answer in time is sort of a combo of the two as well. So, the first item: selected and narrowed a topic appropriately for the audience and occasion, clear central idea, and specific purpose statement. Where have you seen those before? Oh, they're right here. Statement of purpose, thesis, or central idea. So if you've done your outline and you've got a narrowed topic, you're good. You've got all this. Now, when I come over here and I start circling things, I want you to know that I do not grade speeches by feel. A lot of professors, well, at least some that I know, will not take many notes, and then at the end of a speech, they'll say, yeah, it felt about like a B. But they can't justify it, they can't quantify it. And I like to be able to do that. So, here's how I do things. If you do all of the requirements in each of these boxes, well, for one box, you get an excellent. If you do them and you do them well. If you do them and, they're pretty good, that's very good. If you maybe struggle with them or you don't do them very well at all, maybe you leave one out, that's good. If you leave a couple out or you really, really struggled hard with maybe one or two, that's fair. And if it was just unacceptable, that's poor. And if you think of it, this could be like A, B, C, D, F. So the way I do my points: 0 for poor, 1 for fair, 2 for good, 3 for very good, 4 for excellent. And at the bottom down here, you see that's 32 is what this adds up to. If you had a possible 8 times 4, 32, then I put your number of points here, divide that, to get a percentage, and then I multiply it by either 0.15 or 0.25, depending on how much the speech is worth, and that might change. So that's the grading criteria. And I'll always put a full calculation at the bottom, so you can see it. If you like a percentage out of 100, you can see that. If you want to know out of the points that this counts towards your final grade, you can see that as well. Back to this. This one: organization is clear and logical and followed. Key thing, you followed the outline. This is exactly what's on the outline. This is the introduction, attention getter, statement of purpose, thesis, relevance. Then the 1, 2, 3, that's your preview of main points. Then between of those main points, you've got transition 1, transition 2, transition 3. This one gets you into the body. It's 1 to 2, 2 to 3. Then go back to the conclusion, statement of purpose, thesis statement again, relevance, and the closure. C2A over here is call to action. That's only for persuasion. So right now, just don't even worry about that. Number 3, provides appropriate supporting material, number, and type of sources. And you clearly cited them. So again, this one is largely preparation, but you do have to remember to cite them orally and cite them clearly. So this is where, I'm going to write down all of the sources that you cite as much as I can. Now, if you're very clear and say, according to the peer-reviewed journal Nature in 2019, we learned that, that's clear. I got you. And if you'll remember from a previous video, you need to cite the publication and the date. The journal name, the magazine name, newspaper name, news company, whatever, and the date that it came out. If the date's not available, question the source, but if it's still good, you can cite your access date, but most of the time you won't need to do that. So I'll list those out here, and if you do a great job, hey, great. Maybe you got close. If you leave out one of the required ones, like a peer-reviewed journal, it's hard to get above fair or good. And it's really important that you follow those directions in the syllabus. Number 4 here, keep it all on screen, uses language that's appropriate to the audience and occasion in terms of style and jargon. More on that in chapter 7. And you avoid vocal fillers. More on that in chapter 7 as well. But some of this will come from your preparation. You're going to plan out some of the wording that you'll use, but it's always a challenge to keep it consistent from plan to practice, when you are giving the actual presentation. So prepare yourself, but then also make sure you can deliver. So that's why this one I consider half and half. Then we move into the full delivery elements here. So when you're delivering, you use variety, a conversational style, in rate, pitch, and pause that maintain interest. So all the things that we're going to talk about in chapter 7, how fast are you talking? Does your pitch shift naturally? Do you use effective pauses? I don't know. Did you? And then you'll get a grade there. Number 6, did you have clear pronunciation, correct grammar, quality articulation, and adequate volume? Those are again all coming up in chapter 7. But the key thing here is that if you don't know how to pronounce a word, you either pick a new word or go to dictionary.com and make it say it for you. With grammar, I am not the grammar police, but my key sort of, I guess, pet peeve that I hear sometimes is in the preview where people will say, the main points I'm going to discuss today is, it should be R. So keep that in mind. I'll only mark that down if it gets to where it hits my ear and I'm like, oh my God, really? And it happens. So if you get that, don't sweat it, but be aware. Quality articulation. Can I understand what you're saying? This doesn't have anything to do with accents or dialects, by the way. This is just you as clearly as possible, speaking. That's it. And then adequate volume. Can I hear you? Get the grade there. Number 7, uses conversational style again. We'll talk about in chapter 7 how conversational style is both verbal and nonverbal. But did you have appropriate movement, gestures, and posture? And then did you maintain adequate eye contact? More on those throughout the next chapter. But what I'll say about posture is this is about, did you sway? Did you rock from side to side? You don't want to sort of put your weight up on one side and kick your hip out. It doesn't look professional. So, did you control your movement? Did you gesture purposefully? What about that eye contact? For eye contact, I don't expect you by any means to read the speech. I don't want you to read the speech. I don't want you to memorize it either. So find that nice middle ground. If you can make eye contact for 50, 60% of the speech, the rest of the time reference your notes, that's very acceptable. That's fine. So kind of find that balance as you practice. Last but not least, question and answer and time, and then a PowerPoint that's only for the very last speech. But you will always have ideally a question and answer session, but since we are virtual, we're going to not have that this time. So we're going to take that out. But what you always want to remember is that in a live environment, you will want to plan for Q&A. And what I'll tell you briefly is this about Q&A. Do what I call it's land the plane. If you have a simple question, give a simple answer. If you have a complex question, give the best answer you can. And if you have a question that you don't know the answer to, don't lie, but don't say that you don't know either. Just say things like, I didn't come across that in my research. I'll need to get back to you. I mean, think about it. You're at work one day and your boss says, hey, tell me about the Simpson file. And you have no idea who the Simpson file is, what that's about. So you say to your boss, instead of saying, oh, what the hell, I don't know, you say, let me go get the latest numbers on that and I'll be right with you. And then you're out. You go find who the Simpsons are. You come back with that data. Your boss will see that you didn't want to give them wrong information and you're a go-getter because you went to get the latest. It's much better than saying things like, yeah, I don't know. You want to avoid that. For time, you'll see that you have time limits for each speech. For every 30-second block that you're under or over, you get a point deducted. There was more on that in the introduction video on the syllabus. And then, of course, PowerPoints we'll talk about toward the end, and those will be evaluated on this line as well. So that is your evaluation form, and there is your outline. And again, This is all directly related to the outline, and it really should go together. They should be in tandem. If you do a good job on the outline, you'll do a better job on that evaluation form. So, as always, let me know if you have questions. I will record a demonstration video with the outline. So, I'll go from a blank outline, pick a topic, and run with it. It'll take about an hour, but it's very worth watching because you're going to be able to see how to make this outline work for you. It flows. You don't need to ad lib things, you don't need to add in things that aren't there. I don't want you to. And I'll show you when I finish it how that will just come out in a nice, clean way if you stick with the script. All right. So, who knows where I'll be next time, but I will see you soon.